Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Lew.
It is a great day, but we've had a rough week. Lost some things like roofs, and car shields, and car window shields, and all that. It's a bad hailstorm. So, but we're alive. And that's what I'm celebrating today. And also, next week, I really want us to celebrate our 250th anniversary. There's nobody in this room who's going to be alive for that. But there's a person back in our education center that most likely will. And those are the persons that all of us are going to have to guide and direct for the future of America. So today, I want to talk about our blessings from God. That's really important, and it's what we need to celebrate. But to get in the right mind of celebration, we need to deal with America's future, where we're going right now, where it appears we're heading. We're on the wrong track, as Julie. So that was a beautiful prayer. We need to put that in the newsletter this week. I think that was such a great prayer. And I don't want to put you on the spot. If you got it, we're going to put it in the newsletter this week. But it was good. It was really good. So first I want to do is remind us of our blessings. And I have a journal that I read all the time. It's called The Plow. If you want to take a journal, there's two I'd recommend for religious issues. The Plow, definitely, one of the best. Searching for the Soul of America is the title of this. It's by the Brüderbahn, which is a German community, series of communities. There's many around the world that try to live out the the Sermon on the Mount in their community life. But this has got some fantastic articles in it all the time. Just some real inspirational stuff. The Plow. Anyway, I want to talk about Ukraine, where war is not theoretical. 2:37 a.m. A loud explosion somewhere to the north yanked me out of sleep. I lay still and listened. There is this math you run in the middle of the night in Kiev. Distance, direction, what kind of weapon. Then you decide if you have to move. I didn't. My little village outside of Kiev is relatively safe. I fell back asleep. By morning, the whole sky was covered in smoke. Kiev was burning. This is an article by Preston Button. The news told the story. Russia had launched 703 missiles and drones at sleeping Ukraine cities during the night. 703, killing at least 16 civilians across the country and injuring 98. 4 of those dead were in Kiev, including a 12-year-old boy, and more than 60 people were injured in the capital alone. He then talks about going into the city center. By 7 a.m. he was up. That's where he works. He was going into the city center of Kiev. As he walked down the streets to his place of work, which was still standing, he saw many people because it's a busy city, often like New York. And he said on every face, the weariness was so apparent. He talks about how tired the people of Ukraine are. They are so war weary. And he knows they're tired because at night they don't get, he speculates it's because, like him, they get awakened with the sound of missiles during the night. And often they have to run to safety and get their children out of harm. And he said they're just exhausted. They have lived with that now 5 years. 5 years Russia has been attacking the Ukraine. I've never experienced that in my life. Canada doesn't fire missiles at us, and neither does Mexico, right next door. And we've always thought about how the oceans protected us. Now, that illusion kind of fell apart in World War II. But basically, and a little bit with World War One. Basically, we didn't want to get involved in Russia's conflict. I mean, in Europe's conflicts, because that was the old and corrupt order, and we were isolationists before in World War One. And it was the sinking of ships that brought us into that war, and World War II was Pearl Harbor. But other than that, and then we were in Vietnam, and all those things. But I'm glad I don't live in the Ukraine, because, like I said, we don't have that. We don't have missiles in our major cities, destroying our major cities during the middle of the nights. And we have sent our sons and now our daughters to a lot of places to protect American interests, especially democratic interests. And most of Europe after World War II, a lot of Europe went to more democratic governments, away from constitutional monarchies. They still have them, but they have more democratic features in their governments because of America's example. And America, as a land where there was great diversity of the population, has become an example for a lot of Europe that never used to welcome immigrants in great numbers. We have. Many of you probably have forgotten that at our last centennial, the 200th birthday, President Nixon, before that centennial, wanted open borders, wanted us to be known as a land of immigrants. He pushed in Congress for open borders and the relaxing of our border security. And then President Gerald Ford. Forgot Ford. How could I forget Ford? Gerald Ford, and then subsequently President Bush were in charge. They were the ones for the last centennial. And both of them made the top celebration of that centennial our history of welcoming immigrants to the United States. We've all forgotten that. But we don't forget that for long in America, because one of the things I love about America is that, and have loved about America, is that we've been constantly pulled forward by our values at our beginning, the values stated in the Declaration of Independence, and we have been governed by the values of our Constitution. And everything has to conform to what our Constitution itself has dictated from the very beginning about the life, the democracy of America. And that's why I always love on the 4th of July for us to say the Pledge of Allegiance, because it reminds us of the values that are the heart of America. And so it's so much to celebrate next week. And I just hope we do. And that's why I'm preaching one this week, because there's something we need to address about America that is really endangering our future, and that is the very thing that Julie mentioned in her prayer. I'm glad I don't live anywhere else. I do love America, but America is not as free as it has been or as we might imagine. This year is also the 25th anniversary of the World Trade Center bombing in 2001. And that still dominates American life. The bombing changed America. We became very security conscious after the bombing of the World Trade Center. And we don't analyze that as much as we should, because, as I said, it just changed America. Now, we don't have daily missile strikes. How did this change America? Because we realized that terrorists could reach America's shores, that our oceans really didn't protect us. And we kind of acted since 2011 as this was the greatest threat and the greatest devastation and destruction and harm to American life. Did we forget Pearl Harbor? That was on American territory. But we got immediately involved in a war, and we fought back. And it was like we had an enemy that we could see, that we knew. And that enemy, we were afraid that that enemy was going to come to America's shores and attack in California. But that never happened. Not Alaska either, which is amazing. I don't know how that didn't happen. But anyway, the fears we had were soon put to rest. We went to war. We defeated those powers. We thought, at last, peace. And I'd like to say I grew up in an age of peace and prosperity, and I don't have the things to fear that our children have today. But that's not exactly been true, you know? And the reason it's not been true is because when I was in school, there was a Cold War. Today's students have to do drills practicing what happens if a shooter comes into the school. They go to school in fear practically every day. It's in the back of their minds, will I come home tonight? More in the urban places. But a lot of these mass shootings have been in small towns, not in urban centers. And so I think probably I know they do drills here in the schools. When I was growing up, we had to get under our desks when they did a drill. What would you do in case that nuclear missiles were fired? And since we lived just south of Omaha, where we had the air base and the nuclear missile command, and all the B-2 bombers went out from there with nuclear missiles to Europe daily. And we were in a zone where if they fired nuclear missiles at us, we'd be one of the first. So we were told then that we were not safe and protected by our oceans. Now there are weapons that can cross those oceans and destroy our cities. I grew up with that. And most of you did too, if not all of you. Yeah, we had plenty to fear back then. I still remember vividly, and I was only 6 years old, when Charles Starkweather, one of the first mass murderers in the United States history, was going around Lincoln, and I lived in Beatrice, 40 miles away. He even got to Beatrice. He was going around killing people. Do any of you know about Charles Starkweather and his wife, his girlfriend, Carol Fugate? There's a book you want to read, Charles Starkweather, whatever it's called. It's wonderful. The nightly news, there were pictures of Lincoln, people in Lincoln carrying shotguns around the streets. And I shouldn't have watched it at 6, you know. Parents weren't as conscientious then about what their kids watched, because there wasn't much that they couldn't watch on television. That's part of it. But I did watch that nightly news. I saw the picture of the people in Lincoln and how afraid they were of this mass murderer. You know? So there have been moments long before our time that have been a part of the life of America when we were threatened, when we had enemies, when we experienced the power of those enemies to hurt us. There's been plenty of moments in American history. How was it? You know, we haven't experienced, our farmers have not farmed ground where we're soaked in the blood of American lives. But what about the farmers at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a farm country? They had to plow land that was soaked with the blood of Americans. We haven't had to experience anything like that. The Revolutionary War was no picnic. America was not certain it would win that war, and those who started it knew what would happen to them if we didn't win it, but they prevailed, they persevered through the fear. Now, what is the point of all this? The point is not to make us more afraid, but to tell you that there have been plenty of moments in American life where we had things to fear, yet we persevered, and we prevailed, we persevered. Now, I don't want to say, okay, it's always been this bad. What I want to say is, and I want to be clear about this, is the world cannot give us lasting peace. It cannot give us lasting peace. You think World War II was bad? In the Vietnam War, we lost more lives of American soldiers than we did in the Pacific in World War II. 49,000 and plus died in the Pacific. And we talked today about how terrible those battles were. Okinawa. Oh, you know, the scene of them raising that flag shows the American perseverance, because how many American lives were lost trying to take that island. And I thought the tally was something huge. I was shocked to find out only 49,000 Americans died in World War II in the Pacific. Not Europe, that was more. But in the Pacific, Vietnam, 52,000 or 56,000, something like that. We have never received from the world the peace that lasts. I've enjoyed peace and prosperity at times, as you have. Thank God for peace and prosperity when we have it. Now, I know there's a lot of things we're afraid of even now. We're afraid about the economy, prices, gas prices, food prices. Gas prices still are not as high as they have been in previous years, but they're going up or going down, depending upon the day and what's happening in Iran and with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. And, you know, don't watch the news. If you know, it's not going to bring you peace, you know, because you're going to see all these things. We're afraid because terrorists are in our country, and we don't know where they are or what they're going to do. And so the answer is, let's get them all out so we don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm not, you know, should we have free, open borders? No country really can do that. I understand that politically. But getting all the terrorists out, I'm not sure. And all the drug dealers, yeah, that'd be wonderful. All that would be wonderful. Get rid of all the terrorists, all the drug dealers. But will the world give us a peace that is always lasting? No, we've always known as Americans that our freedoms have to be defended over and over again, because the world wants to do something else with us, wants to harm us, you know, and we do have enemies that really want to bring down America. So we know that. We all know that. The world cannot give us the peace that we all would like to have. That's where our text comes in today. Let's read it. What is the hoopla all about? Remember, well, that's a bunch of hoopla. And does anybody remember that phrase growing up? It's a word from Paul in this text, Greek word. Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body, so that you obey its evil desires. Do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God. Let me reread that. I'm going to change the text. Therefore, do not let fear reign in your mortal bodies, so that you obey its evil desires. Do not offer any part of yourself to fear as an instrument of wickedness. Fear and our obsession with it is the same as their obsession with sin. But an instrument, the word instrument is hoopla. What is the hoopla all about? Paul imagines us as instruments of God, and instruments of God have to be used for the righteous things that God desires. That's part of our calling as Christians. We're big instruments in God's hands. We are the hoopla. What's the hoopla all about? You and I. Now, do not offer yourselves to sin or to fear as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who've been brought from death to life, and offer every part of yourself to him as an instrument, another, again, a hoopla of righteousness. For sin shall no longer, or fear shall no longer be your master, because you're not under the law, but under grace. What then? Shall we fall into fear, or shall we sin because we're not under the law but under grace? By no means. And here sin is the most appropriate. Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, whether you are slaves to fear, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. But thanks be to God that though you used to be slaves to sin, you are used to be slaves of fear. You have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. You know, we pledge allegiance to a flag, but we should pledge allegiance every single day to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Probably when we pledge allegiance to the flag, we ought to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the Christian flag. Very few people know it, like we know the Pledge of Allegiance, because we didn't say it in school every day. But that's a pledge that we also ought to make. And probably, yes, not probably, one that really is higher than our allegiance to this flag. I still say I pledge allegiance to it. I want it to remind us of our values. I love that. And I keep under God in there. But, you know, that flag, that's what Paul is talking about. Not offering ourselves as slaves to fear, he says, to impurity and to ever-increasing wickedness. So now offer yourselves as slaves to righteousness, leading to holiness. Nothing in this world can guarantee us our freedom, can guarantee us our safety, can guarantee us peace. Nothing. We're always going to have to defend it. But there is a peace that is lasting. And that peace comes from giving our lives completely to Jesus as Lord and celebrating the freedom that he gives us. For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand fast, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. And when America does that, when it stands fast in the freedom that Christ gives us, our nation will be healed and its future will be bright. And I want to celebrate the 250th with the assurance that in all our hearts, we're going to make sure that the future for Nova and all of her age, when they hit the 3rd century of American life, will still be a democracy. We'll still live in this freedom. We'll still have peace at times, and peace that the world can provide, and peace always that Jesus gives us. Amen. Next week, let's fully celebrate our 250th. I don't know, songs. Bill's going to be preaching. He served in Desert Storm and was CID for 20 years in the military, and he can tell you a lot about America's overseas. And Bill, we're, having served, and there's been many. Phil was in the Marines. James, you were in the Army, Navy. And Linda Merkel was in the Navy, and I think there's others. I don't want to forget. What? Elton Leckler. Yes, he was. Yes, he was in the Navy. And, and Mark, your son serves America overseas, has had to, he's been, both of them, yeah. God, there's a lot of pride in America here. And there's some good things to celebrate. Yes, oh man, our democracy, I'm going on and on with the sermon, but our democracy it's been a rough ride for 250 years. There have been great moments and frightening moments and times before when we were not sure that we would survive as the United States of America, or that our democracy would survive, or that our freedoms would survive. We've had those moments. We've survived them all, folks. There's a peace that God can give us. We need to celebrate all that next week. All right.